Rules of acquisition number 10. There's no special elitist vocabulary that is going to be useful ultimately. Okay. So during the time of the divine principle, most people think that True Father, our movement, was trying to make an appeal to Christianity because Christians are supposed to be the prepared people. Are you familiar with the Bible verse that says, "You have the spirit of the Nicolaitans, which I hate"? Okay. Some Bible scholars believe that the Nicolaitans were people who, for whatever reason, made use of manipulating or controlling the people of the church. You don't have to be that deep to understand why people want to control other people. And if you think that there's no desire to control people in a church among so-called believers, you'd have to be pretty naive. However, since God's best hope is the people of the church, the word hate is used in the book of Revelations to describe how one of the 7 churches mentioned in the book of Revelation, I believe it was Revelation 2, one of the spirit that dominates the church, one of the churches, is the spirit of the Nicolaitans, and that spirit, scholars are leaning towards the idea that that spirit is the spirit of dominating the church. What does that mean? That means you could say you don't trust the laity to interpret the Bible. You could say you don't trust people because of their fallen nature. You could say you don't trust people because of sin nature, and justify why an intermediary is needed. But to perpetuate the intermediary, or the necessity of the intermediary, is to never let people grow up. Okay? To find, that you're offended by people growing up. Find that they spurn your ministering because they've grown up. To find that you're angry with the fact that they've spurned your ministry. To be at odds with people just because they spurn your role as intermediary. Okay? Put you in league with the same motivation of the fallen angels. They wanted the same central position in human society that they once enjoyed in the angelic world. In other words, the desire to control people is there. Now, being an intermediary, if you're an uncle, if you're a parent, so forth and so on, that's good. But you don't have the mind of God, and you're not one after God's heart if people are, in your mind, not supposed to develop a direct connection to God. All right. I say all that to say that having an elitist vocabulary so that it lends itself to the idea that you have to have special knowledge, so that you can funnel people into your court, so that you can act as gatekeeper, and using special vocabulary this way in order to control people. Let's say you have special vocabulary like artification of love, or some of the unification terminology that is special, artistic, and they have to come to the church to find out what Father meant by artistic, anything. Absolute sex, right? Listen, none of this terminology is supposed to be mysterious, perpetually mysterious. Okay, so what are we supposed to do? We are supposed to speak in tongues, which means have the Holy Ghost fluidity to reach people where they are. And you're not supposed to have elitist vocabulary. Elitist vocabulary lends itself to the spirit of the Nicolaitans, which dominates people, at least in the way that you act as gatekeeper of the special vocabulary. Okay? As much as possible, we should try to understand and disseminate the divine principle messages, revelations, and the tradition of heaven and Father's mindset in normal people's terminology in whatever country you live in. Also, people who say that words have any kind of absolute value, I don't know what those people are up to, but the spoken word doesn't have absolute value. The act of speaking has absolute value, but meaning is tied to words. It is the meaning that is a spiritual thing. For example, if I speak Spanish and I say dos, well, a translator would tell you that in English that means two. But if you don't understand what two is, you got a bigger problem than whether or not your mouth and tongue are capable of pronouncing dos or two. Okay? If you don't know what two is. Now, if I say show me two, you can't show me two. Two is an abstraction. It's an abstract concept. Nobody can point out two. There are so many things in the heavens that cannot be pointed to. Okay. And so whether it be high words that somehow separate people from understanding one another, okay, elitist terminologies, or profane terminologies, or so-called the common person's tongue, right? When we say, okay, curse words, none of these words have some kind of absolute value. What they are doing, what words are doing, what their job is to communicate from one soul to another meaning. Okay, even when people curse, the curse is not a sin. Maybe the sin, if you're trying to pin a sin to the curse word, but sometimes curse words, so-called curse words, are not sins. There's a place for curse words where rebukes, certainty, the end of deliberation is signaled by curse words. So the idea that people are trying to put special spiritual meaning on words, elitism is attached to words, and devilishness is attached to words. This entire concept is actually too superficial to be real, or too superficial to be useful. Okay, you even find Catholic priests that will curse in order to communicate with people that need to see those curse words as a sign of certainty. Okay, are you certain in what you're talking about? So the special terminology of True Father should be understood in regular people's terms as much as possible. Okay, why am I saying this? Because it's necessary for settlement age. I had basically I was I had a very special opportunity to talk to young adults, and I used borderline rough terminology in order to demonstrate an authenticity to my walk, my experience, my background, and also to demonstrate that I understood how frustrating resisting temptation to the sexual fall is to 20-year-olds. Okay, and as I spoke in this terminology, street terminology, the terminology of people that they talk to all the time in public school, as I started to show that my familiarity with these concepts, what happened is I was communicating to them that I knew how hard it was and what they were dealing with every day. Okay. And they really wouldn't give me the time of day if they thought that what I was saying was not applicable to their real situation. So I had to demonstrate some familiarity, not just with the external situation of where they go every day, what the people in their school, how the people in their school talk, but the guttural feeling of the temptations that they endure every day. One of the best ways for me to make short work of this authenticating phase of the exchange is to use the terminology that they hear every day. That's when they actually perk up, and I'm telling you this as a professional. However, somebody looking over my shoulder said, you should not talk like that. A man of God should not talk like that. And from the point of view of transmitting a meaning, from the point of view of transmitting an abstract concept like congruent experience of stress to my students, then what I had done was useful. The way that I spoke was useful. But to elitists who say people of God are better than, should not speak this way, those people are actually putting up barriers, and the barriers that they're putting up are not supported by God. Okay? When you talk about an unclean tongue, you are talking about the realm of motive, not speech patterns that come out of your mouth, your lips, and sonic vibrations that are emitted from your mouth. Those sonic vibrations, if they are attached to wickedness, then this is an unclean mouth. Okay? But if they are attached to the motive of generating a real deep connection or trust, okay, and authentication, of common experience, then God would honor that. And I don't need to tell you this based on logic, because I'm pretty sure what I am saying is completely logical. But to some people who are stubborn and hardened in the Catholic Church tradition of demonizing so-called profanity, okay, you need to hear this. And some of you will reject what I'm saying anyway, even though I'm explaining what Father said. It was either 2000 or 2001 where Father was at the UN, and he was saying members of the Unification Church are not forbidden from using harsh language. The question is whether that language builds a bridge or not. So after my presentation got complaints, I posted in my second presentation that quote: there were people in leadership role or who had some influence in the church, that saw to it that I not continue teaching those young adults, even though I was absolutely the most qualified person to help these kids break through in understanding how to hold on to our tradition in a public school setting. I had, at the time, I had 5 years of public school teaching experience in some of the toughest high schools in Chicago and in New Jersey. So my experience talking to young adults was definitely, you're not going to find a lot of people who talk in secular settings to young adults to actually, turn them. So anyway, my point to you is this. If it's in a settlement age, if we're in a settlement age, you can't let this misconception about the value of words stop us from settling. And I'm trying to tell you, newsflash, words don't have absolute value. Okay. They have value of, they have the potential to, they have the purpose of transmitting something that is in the heart. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we can go on and on and on about like the idea that, even magic incantations or actual curses, listen, a curse word cannot curse you. Okay. Someone who has the respect of spiritual entities can curse you. Okay. And they don't have to do it out of their mouth. Okay. So if they have no desire to curse you, then all the spirit world that they're connected to is not motivated to give you a hard time or curse you. Yet, if you think that this person who doesn't have the motivation or desire to curse you has cursed you because of the way that listen, I could go on and on and on about this. And the only real problem is sticking to traditional forms of ignorance. That's what this is about. If you stick to a traditional form of ignorance, you would actually crucify the Messiah. There are some people who do not like True Father because he used curse words. So you're going to like hand him over to Pontius Pilate because you're sure that these words have absolute value. Or you're going to listen to the principle say that these external speaking of words or doing this or doing that, the principle that says it's divided by the motive. So you have to discern what is in the heart of a person who just uttered a curse word, is what I'm saying. And you have to discern what kind of words will communicate or cause this person to be receptive to communication of ideas. And if you can't let go and be that way, I don't know how you can be ultimately useful in all lanes. Now, you're narrowing the kind of people you can talk to. And if you think that it's evil, you will disallow people who are suited to talk to a certain population. If I came from Queens, New York, I am suited to talk to people like that. If you disallow me from being a person who can talk to those people and authenticate the experience of surviving temptations in a certain environment and authenticating to those people who are dealing with that environment, and you disallow me or you demonize me, your ignorance of the value of words and the real function of words would be hindering God. So you're limiting the number, you're limiting the settlement. You're limiting the spreading of God's mind outside the church. Also, if you're trying to, like I said, be elitist and get special attention through using special words that cause people to jump through education hoops, and you're actually deriving a sense of special value just because you know these words, you're a problem. All right. So we can't have these types of assumptions in the settlement age. So rule of acquisition. We don't dismiss people on the outer appearance of language. And we try to actually reach an understanding of the person's mind. Maybe that person is frustrated. Maybe that person is aware of an entire realm of frustration. So they use the curse word. Maybe this person doesn't have a deep vocabulary. Maybe we should be aware of some synonyms that may suffice in communicating with these people. Okay. So rule of acquisition number 10, there's no special elitist vocabulary.